On January 4th, 1903, in front of 1,500 people at Coney Island, New York, a 28-year-old elephant named Topsy was fed poisoned carrots, had copper sandals strapped to her feet, and was killed with 6,600 volts of electricity. The entire thing was filmed. The footage was then distributed across America and shown in theaters for paying audiences. The film still exists today. You can find it in archives right now. And the company behind the camera bore the name of one of the most celebrated inventors in American history, Thomas Edison. This is the true, documented, deeply uncomfortable story of Topsy the elephant, and what her death says about ambition, cruelty, and the real price of progress. Topsy was an Asian elephant brought to America sometime in the 1870s. She spent years performing with the Four-Paw Circus, traveling from city to city, entertaining thousands of people who had never seen anything like her. By all accounts, she was intelligent, capable, and responsive. But circus life in the 1800s was genuinely brutal in ways that are difficult to overstate. Trainers were often cruel, living conditions were harsh, and animals like Topsy had absolutely no protection under the law. There were no animal welfare standards, no oversight, nothing. You were property, and you performed, or you suffered the consequences. After years of this treatment, Topsy had grown dangerous and deeply unpredictable. Over the course of her life, she killed 3 men. One of them was a trainer named J. Fielding Blount, who, according to eyewitnesses, thought it would be funny to feed her a lit cigarette. Topsy had finally, completely had enough. By 1902, she had been sold to Luna Park, a brand new amusement park being constructed at Coney Island in New York. And the management there made a decision. Topsy was too dangerous and too costly to keep. She had to go. The original plan was to hang her publicly. The American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals immediately stepped in and called it inhumane. So electrocution was chosen as the alternative. But here is where the story takes a turn that tells you everything about the era. Luna Park's owners, Frederick and Elmer Dundee, did not treat this as a somber necessity. They treated it as an opportunity. They turned Topsy's execution into a publicity event for their park's upcoming grand opening. They hired a caterer for the occasion. They hired a brass band. They contacted the press and distributed a statement describing it as, and these are real words from a real press release, a first-class execution. Banners advertising Luna Park's May opening were hung around the execution site itself. Topsy was going to die, and her death was going to help sell tickets. Now, this is where Thomas Edison enters the story. And this is also where it becomes important to separate fact from legend, because versions of this story have been exaggerated over the years, and your time is worth the truth. Edison's manufacturing company sent a film crew to document the execution. That is not in dispute. The film they produced, titled Electrocuting an Elephant, was distributed by the Edison Company and shown in movie theaters across America. What historians genuinely debate is the extent of Edison's personal involvement in the planning. None of his surviving correspondence from that period mentions Topsy by name. The famous War of Currents, his decade-long battle against George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla over whether America would run on DC or AC electricity, was effectively already over by 1903. AC had won. The battle was done. And yet, Edison's company had spent years before this staging public electrocutions of animals to argue that AC current was deadly and not to be trusted. Dogs, cats, horses, calves, all killed in public demonstrations designed to frighten people away from the competing technology. Topsy fit a pattern that Edison's world had already established, even if the exact degree of his personal direction on this specific event remains something historians still argue about. What is not arguable is this: the Edison Manufacturing Company filmed Topsy's death, packaged the footage, and sold it as entertainment across the country. Whatever the full truth of Edison's personal role, his company was there, his company filmed it, and his company profited from the spectacle. On the morning of January 4th, Topsy was led toward the execution site. She stopped at a bridge and refused to cross. She shook the copper sandals off her feet when handlers tried to fit them. She refused at first to eat the cyanide-laced carrots they offered her. Elephants are among the most emotionally intelligent animals on this planet. They grieve. They remember. They form bonds that last decades. Every instinct Topsy had was screaming at her that something was terribly wrong. Eventually, the handlers got her in place. The switch was flipped. 6,600 volts of alternating current surged through her body. She stiffened. She collapsed. Within 10 seconds, Topsy was dead. The crowd watched. The cameras rolled. The brass band presumably went home. The footage was shown in theaters across America within weeks. Audiences paid to watch an elephant die. And here is the part that is perhaps harder to sit with than anything else in this story. It was not considered controversial at the time. It was not protested. It was not condemned in newspaper editorials. It was entertainment, a spectacle, something to see. And that tells you something not just about one inventor or one amusement park, but about an entire society and what it had decided was acceptable. Topsy's story faded from popular memory for most of the 20th century. It came back into focus in the early 2000s, most notably through a deeply researched book by journalist Michael Daly simply titled Topsy, which traced her full life from her arrival in America to her final morning at Coney Island. The original film, now more than 120 years old, is held in public archives and remains available to view. Watching it is not easy. Here is what we know without any dispute. Topsy spent her entire life being used to entertain circus crowds, used as a performing animal, used as a publicity hook for a theme park's grand opening, and used, whether deliberately or opportunistically, as film content by one of the most powerful companies in America. She never had a single choice in any of it. She was taken from her natural world, brought to a foreign country, kept in chains, abused by the people responsible for her care, and executed in public while a camera captured every second. Thomas Edison was, without question, one of the most remarkable inventors in human history. Over 1,000 patents. The phonograph, practical electric light, motion picture technology, systems that genuinely transform the modern world. But genius and goodness are not the same thing. And history is never as clean as the statues make it look. The same era that electrified cities, invented cinema, and built the wonders of Coney Island also treated living creatures, and plenty of human beings, as raw material for progress and profit. Topsy deserved better. And more than 120 years later, the very least we can do is tell her story honestly, not as myth, not as legend, but as exactly what it was. A real elephant. A real life of suffering. A real death in front of a crowd. And a reminder that behind every era of great invention, the full story is always more complicated than the history books want to admit. We cover the most mind-blowing true stories from around the world every single week. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because you will not want to miss what is coming next. See you in the next one.